At exactly 1400 hours on February 28th, along the windswept coastline of the Black Sea, the steady gusts carried a natural cover, masking a faint, almost undetectable electric hum drifting toward the settlement of Luzern in the occupied Kherson region. On the ground, officers from the Russian-controlled Hola Pristan District Police Department were engaged in routine live-fire training. Magazine after magazine was emptied into static paper targets. Their focus was locked forward. Front sights, trigger discipline, recoil control. The sharp, rhythmic cracks of rifle fire filled the air, creating a self-imposed acoustic blindness. They couldn't hear anything else. Not above them, not behind them, not coming for them. The constant gunfire had drowned out the sky itself. They believed they were safe. They trusted the layered air defense systems that, on paper, blanketed the southern front. But that trust was already broken. Several kilometers away, moving through an invisible highway in the electromagnetic spectrum, a Ukrainian FP-2 strike drone was executing a perfectly calculated approach. This wasn't a small quadcopter carrying an improvised grenade. This was a purpose-built weapon, a deep penetration strike platform carrying a 60-kilogram warhead. It skimmed low across the terrain, deliberately staying beneath radar coverage, exploiting gaps that had been carefully carved out in the weeks prior. Hundreds of kilometers away, inside a dimly lit control room, the operator watched the thermal feed. The firing range began to grow on the screen. Cold earth, warm bodies, clear targets. The police officers below glowed bright against the frozen February ground like beacons. They were training for a conventional battlefield. But the war had already changed. This was no longer a fight where threats appear on the horizon. Now, they fall silently from above. Before we go further, make sure to like and subscribe. It helps the channel grow and keeps content like this coming. The reason this FP-2 drone could hover undetected over an active training ground without being intercepted by proximity-fused missiles comes down to something far bigger than a single strike. This was the result of a systematic dismantling. In the weeks leading up to this moment, Ukraine's unmanned systems forces, specifically the 9th Battalion Kairos of the 414th Separate Brigade, had been executing a coordinated suppression of enemy air defenses. They didn't just evade Russian systems, they hunted them, destroyed them, removed them piece by piece. A Buk surface-to-air missile system, an S-300V medium-range battery, a Pantsir S-1 hybrid defense platform, a Tor short-range system, all eliminated across occupied Kherson and Zaporizhzhia, one by one. As those radar systems disappeared, something critical happened. The sky opened. Low-altitude air corridors, once deadly, became uncontested pathways. Highways, invisible, silent highways. And the officers training at Luzern were operating under a fatal illusion. They believed they were protected. But the system they trusted existed only on outdated reports, not in reality. The drone operator adjusted the final approach vector, avoided remaining threat zones, locked onto the cluster of thermal signatures. Below, nothing changed. The officers continued firing, unaware, completely exposed. A 60-kilogram warhead was already descending directly above them. The gap in radar coverage wasn't accidental, it was engineered, and at the exact moment the range commander called a ceasefire, the drone struck. The detonation was catastrophic. A violent, concussive blast ripped through the training ground, instantly transforming a controlled environment into a chaotic kill zone. Shrapnel tore through the freezing air at supersonic speed. There was no warning, no reaction time, no cover, because no one dives into trenches during routine target practice. 5 Russian police officers were killed instantly, among them a major serving as deputy head of the Hola Pristan District Department, alongside multiple high-ranking inspectors, lieutenants, senior lieutenants, leadership erased in seconds. 5 others were thrown violently to the ground, severely wounded. The exercise collapsed into chaos. Survivors scrambled, tourniquets, dragging bodies, shouting into radios, calling for evacuation, command support, anything, everything. But they made a critical mistake. They believed it was over. They assumed it was a single strike, a random hit, a one-time event. And that assumption was exactly what the drone operators were counting on. In modern drone warfare, a strike is rarely the end. It's the beginning, it's bait. The Ukrainian operators understood Russian protocols perfectly. When a senior officer is hit, command dictates a response. A superior must arrive, assess damage, restore order, re-establish control. And so, they waited. Above Luzern, the sky appeared empty, silent. But in the electromagnetic spectrum, another drone was already moving into position. For 30 minutes, survivors held the perimeter, tended to the wounded, watched the road, waited. The psychological pressure built with every second. Bleeding, exposed, uncertain, but still no visible threat. The operators remained patient, watching, tracking, waiting for one thing, a high-value target. The trap wasn't just technological, it was psychological, built on predictability, on human behavior, on doctrine. The survivors believed the worst had passed. They had no idea the training ground had already become a kill box. Exactly 30 minutes later, the sound of vehicles broke the silence. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Shalov arrived, head of the department, following protocol, doing exactly what was expected. He stepped out, surveyed the damage, walked into the center of a perfectly constructed trap. This is what's known as a double tap strike, a tactic designed to eliminate responders. Command. Leadership. Hundreds of kilometers away, the operators confirmed visual identification. Target acquired. No hesitation. The second drone dove. Fast, silent until the final second. Then, impact. The explosion was precise, controlled, devastating. The blast caught the lieutenant colonel fully exposed. Shrapnel tore into his body. Abdomen. Lower limbs. He collapsed instantly onto blood-soaked ground, critically wounded. In just 30 minutes, an entire command structure had been dismantled by an enemy they never saw. On March 2nd, the Russian Interior Ministry officially confirmed the strike. A rare admission, and a revealing one, because this wasn't a random attack. This was a system failure, a complete breakdown of local air defense. Behind it all was a coordinated campaign led by a Ukrainian commander known by the call sign Madhyar. His units had spent weeks carving blind spots into Russian radar coverage. Kherson, Zaporizhzhia, sector by sector, system by system, until the sky itself became unreliable. The result? Areas once protected by overlapping radar networks turned into open hunting zones. What happened at Luzern wasn't an isolated event. It was a symptom of a much larger collapse across the southern front. And while this was happening, while officers bled out on shattered training grounds, Moscow was focused elsewhere. A long-term plan, a demographic strategy, a blueprint to relocate over 113,000 civilians into occupied territories by 2045. Donetsk, Luhansk, Zaporizhzhia, Kherson. An attempt to cement control, to legitimize occupation, to build permanence. But none of that matters to a drone operator. Because in the end, they don't see policies, or timelines, or political strategy. They see heat signatures, coordinates, open gaps in a broken air defense network. And trying to convince civilians to move into a region where even senior officers can't survive a